What is up, math superstars? In this special edition of Mr. Peterson Presents, we are going to be walking through a bunch of different problems from the Math 7 SOL test. And so what these are is that these are ones that the Virginia Department of Education suggests the practice. And so let's go through these. So great strategy for this video is that why don't you try them on your own first, and then go back to the problems that you think you had a question on, or use it as an answer key. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to read the problem, and then I'm going to speak about how I would answer it. And so here we go. So this practice is on scientific notation. So we have to identify two numbers that have a value less than 3. And so in this, I'm going to take a look at the exponents first. And so I can say that 10 to the first power would be times 10, 10 to the third power would be times 1,000, 10 to the 0 power is 1, and 10 to the negative second power is 0.01 or 1/100th. And so already, without even figuring out the rest of the numbers, I could figure out that 2.9 times 1 gives me 2.9, so this one's going to be good. And the one where I multiply it by 1/100th would give me my second option. You notice that 3.2 times 1,000 is a little bit bigger than 3, so I'm going to cross that one out. And the same thing with 2.9 times 10 is bigger than 3. So I have two options here, and we must make sure that you identify both options. So which number would make the number sentence true? And so we have 2/11ths is less than some number, which is less than 1.42. And so let's try to figure out which number would work here. And so we have letter A. If we make it all into decimals, letter A as a decimal is 1.66 with a line over it. 22% as a decimal is 0.22. And 1.3 times 10 to the first gives us, it's the same as 1.3 times 10, which gives us 13. And so already 13 would be out because that's way too big. And then I have to deal with letter A, B, and C. So letter A, when I compare these two decimals, 1.6 and 1.4, I know that letter A is too big. So I have two options. I have B and I have C. So both of these are smaller than 1.42, which is a good thing. But now we have to figure out what 2/11ths is as a fraction here. So in order to figure out 2/11ths as a fraction, we can go ahead and do some long division here. So I can say 11 divided by 2, and if I add my decimal point and my 0, so I'm going to do the same thing here, and so I can say 11 goes into 20 one time with a remainder of 9, and then I add a 0 and I bring it down. 11 goes into 90 8 times, so I have a remainder of 88, and I bring a 2 down, and I can bring another 0 down. So 11 goes into 20 one time, so 11, remainder is 90, so I can see I have a repeating pattern here of 1818. So now I have my decimal here. I have to figure out which one of these two is going to be bigger than the decimal I just got for 2/11ths. And so I can see that 1.8 is definitely bigger than 1.5, and so I'm just left with option C. C would be 22%, would be the correct option. So here we have this question. The original price of the chair was $545. The store discounted the price of this chair by 25%. What is the exact price of the chair with this discount? And so you can see that we're looking for the price of the chair, not the discounted amount. And so what we can do is we can set up a proportion. So it would be x over 545 would be equal to 25 over 100. And so when I go ahead and cross multiply here, I have 100x would be equal to 545 times 25 gives me 13,625. And if I go and divide both sides by 100, I have x being equal to $136.25. And so right now I found the discounted amount. This is really important because it's looking for the price that you're going to pay the person to get this chair. And so right now we can already eliminate A because A is the discounted amount. If you click A because you just got that number, you're not reading the whole entire problem. So our next step is we're going to take $545 and we're going to subtract $136.25. That's going to be our discounted amount here. So if I go 545 minus $136.25, it gives me an amount of $408.75. So in following these steps, I can circle B as the correct answer. Do not fall in the trap of doing the discounted amounts. That is a bad idea. So we have this question. Max ran 5 miles on Thursday. 1 mile is equal to 5,280 feet. Which proportion can be used to determine how many feet X Max ran on Thursday? And so I can notice that I'm going to set up my own proportion and see if that shows up as one of my answers. So I can do 1 mile is the same as 280 feet. And if Max ran 5 miles, because we have miles over feet, so our second fraction in our proportion has to be miles over feet. So it'll be 5 over x. So let's figure out which one of these options works for me. So I can look at letter A. I have 1 over 5,280 equals 5 over x. So immediately I found the correct answer. And so the biggest thing is set up your proportion the way you would set it up, and then figure out if your options are there. If not, you might have to do feet over miles and then feet over miles to kind of see if that would work also. So here's this question. One way to determine the surface area of the cylinder is to A, add the areas of both bases to the rectangular area around the cylinder. B, add the areas of both bases. C, multiply the area of the bases by the height. And D, multiply the rectangular area around the cylinder by pi. And so what this is asking is, how do we get the surface area of this cylinder here? And so we can see that it has 2 circles. So it's 2 circles. So I'm going to figure out the area for both of those. That's the same as 2 pi r squared. So pi r squared gives me 1 circle. I'm going to multiply that by 2. Then what we do is we're going to add that to this inside part. Actually, when you unfold it, gives us a rectangle. And so automatically we have A as our answer. And so if I was going to keep writing this out, 2 times pi times radius times height. And so I can see right here, 2 pi r is the same as the length times the height of our cylinder. Same as the length times width gives us the rectangular area. And here I have 2 circles. And so you might ask you a question like this: how does this equation break down? And you kind of have to figure out the wording from there. But the hint is that we're adding the area of both bases, base 1 and base 2 of our cylinder, to this rectangular area in the middle. So a container in the shape of a cube is completely filled with sand. The container has an edge length of 8 inches. And so automatically here, if I have a cube, all of my sides are exactly the same. So I have my length is 8, my width is 8, and my height is 8. What is the exact number of cubic inches of sand needed to completely fill the container? So I can say that the volume is the same as length times width times height. in which this time I'm multiplying 8 times 8 times 8. And when I do that, 8 times 8 times 8 gives us 512 cubic inches of sand. So here we have this rectangular prism A that is shown. Rectangular prism B has the same height and width, but its length is 8 inches. And so what I'm doing is I'm multiplying my length by 2. So the volume of prism B is twice the volume of prism A, half the volume of prism A, a fourth, or 4 times. And so, like we said before, whenever I multiply one side length, when I deal with volume, that's actually doubling the volume. So since I multiply by 2, twice the volume is multiplying the volume by 2. So which classification must describe the figure shown? So here we have several options. So here I have one pair of parallel sides. So I can automatically say that this is going to be a trapezoid. And the only other classification for a trapezoid is a quadrilateral. So already those are the two that I'm looking for. It's going to give me option D. And so we don't even have to go through the rest. The arrows tip it off. So these two arrows right here, we have a different color so you can see a little better. It says that we have one pair of parallel sides, which gives us the trapezoid. Since it has 4 sides, it can also be a quadrilateral. So this question says, select each classification that does not describe this figure. And so here on this test, you need to read carefully each word. Take your time because you are here at this question alone. So take your time to really understand what it's saying. Select each classification that does not describe this figure. So we have parallelogram, trapezoid, rhombus, square, rectangle, and quadrilateral. So we can already eliminate trapezoid because that's the one that has one pair of parallel sides. A square means that every angle measurement needs to be 90 degrees. And so here, the way that's denoted for a square would be the square in each corner. So we can eliminate square. We can say that this is definitely a rhombus because it has each side is congruent to each other. Opposite angles are congruent, which means that the opposite sides are also parallel. This can't be a rectangle because rectangles also have 90-degree angles. It can be a quadrilateral because it has 4 sides. And it can also be a parallelogram because it has the opposite sides that are congruent, opposite angles that are congruent, and the opposite sides are also parallel. So here we have 3 choices here that say what it is. And since I read this question carefully, I'm going to figure out that rectangle is going to be a correct answer to this problem. Square is going to be a correct answer to this problem, and trapezoid. I almost fell in the trap. I was in the mode of thinking that, oh man, this is a parallelogram, rhombus, and quadrilateral. But this question says which does not describe the figure. So we need to make sure that we circle the correct answers for this one are rectangle, square, and trapezoid. So here we're given this rectangle here, and it says which graph, so on the next page, or next screen, sorry, which graph shows the rectangle rotated 90 degrees clockwise around the counterclockwise, keyword, around the origin. So I know that I'm going to move this rectangle in the direction toward the right. So let's see what our options are. So I have letter A. We already know that letter A is incorrect. The rectangle was down here in quadrant 3. This one's rotated 90 degrees clockwise. That's no good. And letter C is the same thing. My rectangle is down here. We're rotating at 180 degrees, so that's no good. And then I'm left with B and D here. So in B, the rectangle was on its side, and now I'm rotating this image. So in rotation, B is going to give us the correct answer. D is just a translation. It just slide the image over. So it's different than rotation. So I'm going to cross out D as well. So this table shows types of pizza and drink selections at a party here. And so types of pizza are pepperoni, which is my favorite, vegetable, which is gross, and plain cheese, which is okay. You have drink options: apple juice, orange juice, cola, and water. So our friend Maya will randomly select one type of pizza and one drink from these choices. So what's the probability that she's going to select pepperoni pizza and cola? And so here we have three choices for pepperoni. For pizza, one of them is pepperoni, so I'm going to say that's 1/3. And if I multiply that by the drink choices, cola, there's 1/4. And we're going to be multiplying these two fractions together to give us 1/12. So I can circle letter A as being the probability of Maya selecting pepperoni pizza and cola. Another way to do this is that if you say there are 3 choices for pizza and 4 drink options, we can say that there are 12 total options. And we can see that letter A is the only choice to have because it has 12 in the denominator. So which table of values represent the same relationship as the rule y equals 3 times the quantity x plus 2? And so for these problems, what you'll do is you'll fill in the x value to see if the y value matches. So let's go ahead and do that. So when we fill in y equals 3, oops, make sure I write it correctly, 3x plus 2. If I fill in -3 for x, I'm left with -1 times 3, which gives y to be -3. And you can see that this works for this first part. So next step is, let's go and fill in 0 for x. So when I fill in 0 for x, I have 0 plus 2 is 2, and 3 times 2 is 6. So I can see that the second one matches for A. So 2 for 2, so let's try our last one here. So if I fill in 5 for x, I have 5 plus 2 gives me 7. 7 times 3 gives me 21. So I can say that letter A works because all 3, when I fill in x, gives me the y value. And say if A did not work, I would have to go to B, then C, then D. So this one takes a little bit of time, but as long as you're following the rule y equals 3 times the quantity x plus 2, you'll be in great shape to figure this out. So now we're given this question: which rule is best represented by this graph? And so here we have this blue line that's in our graph. We have to figure out which value will work here. And so right away, let's try to make a little x and y chart to figure out some values here. So let's figure out when x equals 0. So when x equals 0 on our chart, our y value is going to be equal to 1, 2, 3, 4. When x is 1, I'm looking at it right here, when x is 1, our y value is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Our y value is 6. And when x equals -1, our y value is 1, 2. So right there, I just figured out what 3 points are on our line. So I just figured out the easiest 3 points that I can come up with. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my x and y values to figure out which equation matches this line. So this is the way we're going to do this. So let's start with letter A. So if I filled in 0 for x, so 2 times 0 is 0, plus 4 gives me 4. So I can say y equals 4, so that one works. I can say that 2 times 1 gives me 2, plus 4 gives me 6. But I can also say that -1 times 2 gives me -2, plus 4 gives me +2. So thankfully, I'm left with A as the solution to this. And so very simply, to recap this problem, what you do is you find 3 points to work with on our line. So I picked the 3 easiest. I used 0 as the next value, then I figured out where it was on the y-axis. Same thing for 1, -1, to give me the easiest to work with. And so sometimes you might have to go to B, C, and D to figure this problem out, but take your time because you'll be on the right track. So here we have this question. Larry charges a customer a one-time fee of $15 plus $40 each week. Which table represents the value of this situation? So if I was going to write this out as equation, so I can say y would equal $15 plus $40 for every week. And so this is how much, say if I put 1 week in, I can figure out how much our friend Larry is going to charge me for 1 week of whatever I'm using. So either it's rental or cell phone. I only know what we're paying our friend Larry for. But here he's charging us money for something. And so I created this equation that's going to be used to figure out what our values are going to be. So if I start with letter A, if I fill in 1 week, so our 1 week charge is going to be $15 plus $40, should give us $55 is our 1 week charge. So 1 week is equal to $55. And you can see I'm also trying to figure out 3 weeks. Our 3 week value would be 3 times 40 gives me 120, plus 15 gives me $135. And so here we're already given our 2 values. A doesn't work. B, the 3 week value doesn't work because that's a little too much money. D doesn't work because I didn't pay Larry enough the first week. And I'm left with C as our options here. And so very simply, to recap on this type of problem, set up the equation the best you can. If you can't think of the equation, just try to figure out, okay, he's going to charge $40 each week. So you figure out how much he charges every week. So 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, whatever it is. And then you have to add that one-time fee of $15 back into it. So this question is asking us to select the following that's an expression. Expression means no equal sign. And so let's go ahead and circle the ones that do not have an equal sign here. And I think I got them all. So ones that have equal signs, I'm going to cross those out, make it easier. This is just very simply expressions have no equal sign. So here I have this problem. It says complete the solution set for the inequality using one of the symbols and one of the numbers below. And so here, let's go and figure out our first one is -4n is less than 16. And when we divide by a negative, we need to make sure our sign flips. I'm pretty confident that this is going to be on the SOL test. And so I can say that n would be greater than -4. So in the little circle, I got my greater than sign, and I'm also going to be selecting -4. So most of the time, most likely, it looks like I'm going to drag and drop these items into it. So over here on the right hand side, I have -30 is greater than 6y. If I divide both sides by +6, my sign doesn't change. So I'm left with -5 is greater than y. So I'm going to drag and drop -5 up there, and I'm going to drag and drop the greater than sign. So you can see that they're probably going to ask what happens when I multiply or divide by a negative for an inequality. So now I need to graph the solution to the inequality shown. In order to graph this, I need to get n by itself. So I have -3 is greater than n plus 4. If I'm going to go ahead and subtract 4 from both sides, I'm left with n being greater than -7. And so this is right here after I do the one step. This is what I'm going to graph. And so I can say that -7 is less than n, but I can also say that n is greater than -7, whichever way is easier for you to look at this problem. And so I'm going to do an open circle on -7, and I'm looking for all the values greater than -7. So I'm going to shade in my arrow going to the right would be the correct answer. And so the way I can go ahead and double check this problem is saying, I'm just going to fill in 0 for n. So if I fill in 0 for n, 0 plus 4 gives me 4, which is greater than negative 3. And so I can say that since my arrow shading covers 0, I can say that 0 is one of the solutions, and I did this question properly. So which expression completes this equation using only the multiplicative property of 0? So I'm looking for which one of these expressions simplifies 6 times 0. And so you can see right here, A and B both have 6 times 0 in it. So I'm going to cross those out. I'm going to cross out D because it also has 6 times 0. So I'm actually only left with one option, which is C. Which equation illustrates the multiplicative identity property? So for identity, this is where I would multiply the left times 1. And so to see what happens on the right. So automatically I'm going to cross out A because that's when multiplying by 0. D gives me the inverse. 2/3 times 3/2 gives us 1. And so here we have B and D and C. C, it looks like that they simplified 8 plus 0, giving you 8. So that's identity property of addition. So I'm left with just answer B. So you can see here I have two fractions, 3/8 times 1/2 times 1. So there's the times 1 giving me the result of what I already had, 3/8 times 1/2.